Well, back to Iowa now, and those possible Republican candidates for president. This is all going down in Des Moines at the state's first ever agriculture summit. The summit features topics that are important to Iowa voters and a test of political waters for many Republicans like Jeb Bush, who during the summit defended his stance on immigration.
Immigrants that are here need to have a path to legalized status. No one I know has a plan to deal with illegal immigrants to say that they're going to be rounded up and taken away. There isn't a specific plan. What we need to do is to make sure people pay fines, that they learn English, that they work, that they don't receive government assistance, that they earn legalized status over the long haul.
So, who won and who lost? Tammy Bruce is a radio talk show host and Fox News contributor. Jessica Ehrlich, a former Democratic congressional candidate and Democratic strategist. Tammy, let me first start with you.
Sure.
Just heard Jeb Bush lay out, and he's going to be laying this defense out over and over again. Will it help?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, he clearly believes in what he's saying, and good for him. The problem is, in this particular case, he uses a straw man. There has never been anybody on either side of the aisle who's advocating for the rounding up of people and the expelling of them. We've never really deported people, except perhaps some criminals. So it's very strange that he would use that straw man. It also indicates a kind of, I think, a desperation in a certain way. But you have to give him credit. He believes in it. He's going to stick with it. I do think it feels like he's running already in the general as opposed to in the primary, but that may also show that he's a little bit overconfident, and I think that's a mistake.
Well, Jessica, that's a good point. If it seems like he's running in the general, does that give him a chance to reach out to Democrats?
Well, I mean, certainly I do disagree with Tammy in the one sense that there are people who want to just send everybody back to where they came from. So that is a common refrain. And actually, the one thing that's different is that Senator Lindsey Graham, who was part of the Gang of Eight, also has a very similar policy to Jeb. I think Jeb is polling nationally very well, particularly amongst Republicans. And he's doing particularly well in New Hampshire. So it'll be interesting to see if he sort of keeps going. I think it's great that he's sticking to his guns, that he's not flip-flopping. There could be a chance, not necessarily with Democrats per se, but with independents, that because he has this more of a set stance that he's had since he was the governor of Florida, that it appeals to more than just the red meat base of the Republican Party. But as Tammy said, he does have a primary that he has to get through, and so far it looks like Scott Walker is really giving him a run for his money.
Yeah, Scott Walker, Tammy, from pretty much a neighboring state. I mean, look, a lot in common with the folks in Iowa. What happens 10 months from now when they have that Iowa caucus? Will that be really meaningful? Can this stick, or is that just something that they really basically buy and pay for?
Well, look, I mean, you've got a dynamic where Iowa was very important for Barack Obama. That really established him nationally as a serious candidate. But at the same time, what's important about a state like Iowa, unlike, let's say, New York or California, is this is a test for candidates in a state where people expect to look you in the face and shake your hand, as they did certainly at this summit. And Scott Walker has the edge that he was at the Iowa Freedom Summit, so they know him there. He is well ahead of everyone, including Jeb Bush in Iowa. And so I think Scott Walker is the one to beat here. He's been performing very well. But the difference here at this summit also is interesting. It's not about speeches. It's about questions and answers. And I think Jeb Bush has been doing better in that regard than Scott Walker. But this is good testing. It's good practice for somebody like Scott Walker. And I think that Jeb Bush and others are perhaps dismissing him a little bit, maybe because they didn't expect him to come up so strongly. But Iowa matters clearly. It's important, and this is a good test summit. That no Democrats who were invited to go, by the way, went, and I think that that's also a sign of some arrogance on their part.
Wow, Jessica, finally, what does that mean when Hillary gets there? We saw what happened last time.
Well, I think particularly for this summit, they were looking at this as a very, one-sided political summit. It was certainly more of a partisan breach there that you had of a group getting together. So that's why the Democratic candidates didn't attend. And it'll be definitely interesting to see, what happens going forward. I think there's also an interesting point that Tammy was talking about, the importance of Iowa. Hillary's been there many times. It's a place that she's very familiar with. But actually, so has Jeb. And he even mentioned that he had been there over to 50 counties when his father was running and his brother. So it is interesting that Scott Walker, despite Jeb being familiar with people there in Iowa, is is not performing as well as as Scott Walker is at this time. So it's definitely more of a difference, I think, that, as Tammy said, Scott Walker's sort of the dark horse in a way for many Republicans, whereas Jeb is much more popular nationally.
Can I just say,
but Iowa is only the beginning.
I think it's a mistake to say that this is a partisan dynamic. This is about agriculture. It's about ethanol subsidies. It's about the Midwest. It's about everything that matters. It's the breadbasket of the country. To suggest that the Democrats are dismissing the Midwest or the agriculture business and industry and farmers is why Democrats will have problems if they figure that this isn't something they can
Democrats
play in.
Dismissed agriculture.
Well, you said that they're giving it away
They're supporting the Farm Bill in the House. But this was a closed 900 ticket event that was very private. And
you said
the Democrats aren't doing that. But final word, you know what's going to happen?
What?
A lot of fried Twinkies and corn dogs at the Iowa State Fair this summer.
There you go. But it doesn't have to be partisan unless you abandon the environment.
Trust me, fried Twinkies ain't partisan. Both sides can have it.
There you go.
All right, Jessica and Tammy, thanks so much.
Thanks, Eric.